Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about Vodou and Voodoo. Now this is going to be not necessarily specific practices or specific spirits, Loa, in these traditions, but why they were basically banned for so many decades and hundreds of years even, especially in Haiti, because African slaves were brought there far before they were brought to the United States. Not brought, but forced to come as slaves. Why was anything African, as far as garb, language, tradition, spirituality, religion? Why were all these things banned? And the slaves basically weren't allowed to practice or even refer to any of them. It's basically because the white colonists, they could control somebody if they allowed their religion to be the only religion available to the slaves, whether we're talking about Haiti or we're talking about the United States, the colonies in the United States. If you had control over what a people believed, if you had the only source of religious doctrine that they had access to, and that they couldn't even read it, priests that were allied with you were the only ones who could read it. And those who could read it, those slaves that did learn to read, a lot of them were killed. If you controlled someone's mind to that extent, their very belief process, their very understanding of the universe and reality, you could control that person's body, mind, and I wouldn't say soul, but it would very much seem like you can control their soul. And now, the thing that the colonists didn't account for was the tenacity of the human drive to be free, to know something beyond slavery, to know something beyond servitude and desolation, oppression. The human spirit, even in certain circumstances where it is beaten down to a bloody pulp, can rise up, and that pulp can be fertilizer. Now, I don't know anything about being a slave. I don't even know about being African. Even in the United States, in places where there isn't a lot of racism, then there's a lot of racism throughout the United States. But even in places where there isn't a lot of racism, I don't know what that is like. But I can say from accounts of slaves in Haiti and the United States, what they went through by referring to books on Vodou and Voodoo. Now, Vodou and Voodoo has a long history of having secret writings, of writings that were kept away, hidden from colonists, and these writings weren't always necessarily on paper, but a lot of the time they were in vives, in symbols, and these vives were hidden in the images of saints. And now that's basically them using the religion of the colonists, whether they be in the United States or Haiti, using the religious imagery forced upon them to communicate messages and to basically signal that they are a Vodou and that they're actually worshiping this or that spirit. This is mainly done in Haiti because vives aren't used as much in Voodoo. I don't know a whole lot about Voodoo, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but Vodou it's pronounced Vodou, V-O-H-D-O-O, Vodou. But I say Vodou because I'm an English speaker and living in the United States. Now, the Haitian Loa are a little bit different from the Voodoo Loa. They're both called Loa. There's another tradition that deals with the same very similar spirits called orishas, and another tradition, Santeria, that deals with less imagery and more just the spirits themselves. But really, the slave influence was the slave influence of having to hide their culture, of having to hide their identity, having to work in secret for their spirituality, was thriving in Haiti long before the United States, and then the United States as well, where these two traditions blossomed, Vodou and Voodoo. And now, the extent of the human spirit, like I was talking about just a second ago, it can create cultural identities, cultural traditions from the scraps that are left from other traditions, from other lands, from Africa, from islands, There's a lot of native influence in both Vodou and Voodoo. There's a lot of there's a lot of Catholic influence in Vodou, less in Voodoo, but they did mix in the Catholic faith with their practices because it was just a mesh of everything that they could put together and to develop an identity, a working system that they could practice, obtain things from spirits, understand the universe through these spirits, and basically have a working reality that they were a part of that couldn't be taken away from them. Now, when it comes down to the Catholic priests actually, and then later on the Protestant priests, actually believing that Africans were less. It's fairly evident through most writings that the priests did not look to the more compassionate side of Christianity, but chose the parts that could keep people down. They were completely allied with the slave system, and this is why they were able to try to control the slaves and not feel bad about it. They only chose the parts of the Bible that they wanted to use. There were some priests that were ethical in the way they used the Bible, but most were not. They were allied with the colonist systems, at least the ones that were in those colonial eras, because no other priests who disagreed with that system would go there to help the colonists oppress the slaves. And we have to understand that because of this great oppression, and because Christianity was forced on them, there was a Christian element in these systems. But because it was forced on them, there's a lot of aggressive spirits that are dealt with in Vodou and Voodoo. There's a lot of seemingly dark spirits, seemingly spirits that want animal meat. They want alcohol, which is a very human thing. They want dancing. They want offerings of candles of light. These seem very materialistic, but the slaves had to once again work with what they had, and they wanted things in return. So they dealt with spirits. They gave identities to existing spirits. I'm not prepared to say that they're egregor or gregori, which are just spirits created through faith. Because I don't believe that. I think these spirits existed and were willing to take on whatever names and understandings that were put onto them. But I do believe that these spirits existed before Vodou and Voodoo existed, as it does in the places where it exists. But there's some people that say, even Vodou and people who practice Voodoo, that they were created with the traditions. But I believe that these forces existed beforehand, and they were willing to work with the oppressed, and they were very close to this material plane. That's why they want material as offerings, because they were very close to the material plane, and they were willing to accept the offerings and give back in return, which I have actually seen in my own workings, though they have not been as effective as if I had a direct mambo or halgun above me telling me what to do, but I have had results, which is very interesting, because a lot of people say if you're not under a mambo or a halgun, and if you're not in a society, then you can't, the Loa won't work with you, but they have worked with me. And of course, there's some Vodou people who practice voodoo that say if you don't have any African blood, you can't work with them, but there's so many more that say that you don't have to be African, because these spirits will work with you based on your desire to work with them, based on your desire and consistent offering of things. But back to the idea of why Vodou and Voodoo were basically, the practitioners were oppressed and not allowed to even go near the any African tradition or native tradition at all. But like I said, with the priests and the desire to control and try to control the people, the very being of these people. Another element is that it was banned because, for the simple fact that they didn't really know what the African tradition was. They had, most colonists, most slave owners, well, I think all slave owners are bad people, but there were different magnitudes. However, they didn't care to know, so they didn't care to look into it. The dancing, the images, the seeming tribal nature of every facet of the tradition, and they couldn't see any deeper understanding. They just imagined these demons they were conjuring up, and that frightened them. They never cared to actually find out about these traditions in Haiti or in Louisiana in the South, and where voodoo was practiced in the United States later on from Haiti again. But you know, the Haitian people that were mixed with the natives, with some Catholicism, some white, and a whole bunch of African slaves and mixed slaves, did create Vodou and pledge to the spirits that they named with this system, that they would either overthrow the slave masters or die trying. Now, they did overthrow them. Many slaves died, but almost all the slave-owning colonists were killed, and the slave owners were driven out. This was only the beginning of Haiti's troubles, though. I mean, it seemed like it should have been the end, but it wasn't. They were victorious. It took much longer for the slaves in the United States to gain the same rights, but by no means was it better or worse in Haiti or in the United States, because there's just so much pain in those time periods of slavery for Africans and the natives that it's hard to say. I'm not going to try to say who suffered more, because that's a ridiculous thing to do, especially for me living all this time later and being white. But I can really appreciate the willingness of the Vodou spirits, and which is one of the ones I work with, the Loa Ugu Ferai, Bela Samedi, Papa Legba. I can really appreciate them working with me regardless of my previous lack of knowledge or lack of association. And I think that these are the forces that would have chosen to work with the slaves who were trying to overthrow their masters or had very little to offer. It seemed very evident to me that, and it does seem evident to me, that these Loa, these spirits, are very significant to people who are oppressed and in very dire straits and very needy, and can only offer certain things, and can't understand, and can't really, don't always have the time to understand the highest forms of God, don't have time to commit to the highest, but want to have results right now. It's not that there isn't a higher idea in Vodou or Voodoo, but they need people, Vodouissants like myself, want results right now. But there is Bandier, the idea of the source, the creator of all, that the spirit, the Loa are underneath, and the Loa aren't necessarily gods, they're spirits underneath this one creator aspect, Bandier, and many Vodouissants choose to completely refer to the one creator as the Christian God, basically, the idea of a Christian God. And many Vodouissants are Christian. Most are, actually. Much fewer are pagan. So this kind of shows the flexibility of the system, and why it was so easy to unite a people who some believed in gods, some believed in one Christian God, and some had other ideas, just spiritual ideas. But they was all united under this identity to overthrow and to work with the forces of creation that would work with them and help them towards an identity that was separate and something that couldn't be taken from them by the slave-owning colonists and the slave masters. When we try to understand other systems, other religions, we can imagine how scary Vodou and Voodoo may seem, and just because of that, I'm sure it would have been banned back then or outlawed, and that's one of the reasons, besides the reason just to control, that they wanted to control the slaves. But this is why it's very important to not close our minds to other ideas and other ways of doing things, of spiritualities or religions, because we end up wanting to oppress what we don't understand, and we don't want to repeat any of the mistakes, even if this is just one of the mistakes, not of the many mistakes the slave owners did, but we don't even want to repeat that mistake. We have to try and understand through other people's perspective, and this is the only way that these cultures can be maintained, and that they're not outlawed in the places that they're outlawed even now. In many countries, not in the United States, but there are many spiritual traditions that are outlawed even even in the Middle East, in Asia, in some countries in South America, there are many things that are outlawed, just like the slave masters wanted to outlaw and did outlaw Vodou and Voodoo. So we have to learn from the ignorances of the people that came before us and realize the significance of the spiritual paths of those who were able to throw off their yoke, however long it took. And that's basically all I wanted to say for this video. It's been a long video, I know, but it's been a lot of information, or at least me expanding on pieces of information. But these are the reasons why Vodou and Voodoo were banned, and kind of what the banning is. And banning was fear and desire to control, and how we can learn from it. And that's by being open to other traditions, really trying to learn about them, learning history, and trying to understand the significance of people's cultures and spiritual traditions. But that's all I really want to say for today. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up down there, and I will see you in the future. Thank you very much.